dating apps, right? So you have, at one extreme, you have eHarmony, where you have to do like this 3-hour personality study, blah, blah, blah. Tinder is at the absolute opposite extreme. All it does is, you open up the app, it shows you a picture of someone that's within 25, 50 miles, and the question is yes or no. And if you say yes, and then they show that person your picture, and they say yes, then they connect to you, and you can start communicating. But it's
Okay, let's go ahead
and class and
blows out.
as it sounds. It's really meant for short-term relationships, not long-term relationships.
And Luis, Joe, come on down, guys. So the intent here is to wrap up by essentially agreeing on what we heard and what we want to go forward out of here as the conclusions of this event. So if what you hear in these reports are not what you think should be in the reports, if it isn't what you heard, let us know, and we will update them as we go ahead. So we have rapporteurs for each session. In fact, I'll say a little bit about session 1, Ingo session 2, Dan session 3, Luis session 4, and Joe session 5. So hopefully that's all good. Session 1. And in addition to our schedule is the reception at the end at a place called the Dapper Duck. How about that? So more to come on that in a minute or two, but that's a teaser to keep you around, because then you'll find out where it's at, right? So session 1, we had an opening. I had to find perhaps some open approaches to big geodata. Let's see how these survive. Loose coupling while enabling competition, open strategies of the interfaces, geospatial services that keep processing close to the data, portability of data across clouds, algorithm and workflow abstractions. I think we saw quite a bit of that. We had a little bit of discussion about APIs, mostly at the point of saying, well, if we talked about that, we'd end up talking for a whole lot longer, right? I remember some comment like that. So, Jibo gave us an overview, energy, and several examples, energy monitoring and prediction, electrical outages predicted in advance of a hurricane. I should probably say that better. I thought that was pretty interesting. Population dynamics and settlement mapping. Analytics as a service, R in particular, as the underlying analytics engine, but Rapid as a service make it available. And what he phrased as open source driven geospatial science at Oak Ridge. So that was our first session right now. That's all I have as the notes on that. I would be pleased, or if need be, add other stuff, change it, what have you. Let's see, session 2. Here we go. Ingo?
Thanks, George. So in session 2, we have 2 presentations by Jeff and Jeff. One on the data centers and the other one on the streaming aspects. Just a couple of aspects I would like to highlight from Jeff Walter's presentation. What are the challenges? Well, it's quite a number of challenges, and one of the very interesting one is about the humans in that loop, because as soon as we start distributing data, we do have standards, we do have metadata, we have profiles, we have all sorts of stuff, but we need to work with the humans at those various institutions, and trying to get things together and working is to a large extent a human interoperability problem as well. There's a very interesting evolvement that is from the old-fashioned more search for something, discover it, download it, and then do all the processing locally, towards processing somewhere in the system that might be in a cloud or it might not be in a cloud. That's not so important. The key aspect is that we are moving from the unknown customer, where we provide a very rich query interface and or a very rich processing interface, towards a known customer where we need to know and understand much better what are the requirements from these customers. And then we can pre-package functionality, we can pre-package data sets. Jeff, you said that it's more the abstract services that become more and more relevant. Some of the ones I captured from your presentation. Jeff gave a great presentation on streaming, on the challenges on streaming and high performance computing or performance in general. Current situation, well, we do have a focus on functionality if you go through the Apache stack of products, but it's not really focused on performance, and there is a huge potential when we address this, these gaps. Well, it's not really gaps because the focus had been, or the intention had been slightly different, but there is a potential to amend those products with parallelization approaches to improve performance. Building the community, better understand requirements, better understand what needs to go where, bringing the community together, maintain the community is pretty important, so that we can then improve the algorithms, improve the programming models that we can use to apply the streaming to big data in a very performant environment. That was pretty much it. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and give that to Dan.
Any comments about that summary? Obviously, there's just a summary.
That might fix the mic.
Indeed.
Sorry for the lack of polish on my slides. I tossed them together at the last second, realizing they were probably B2B slides. This session, we had 3 presentations. We had a really good summary of sort of SQL and the position SQL is taking as all of these transitions and changes are happening. Had a nice summary of the national map and some of the existing issues and plans and things like that for USGS. And then a very detailed summary of spatial indexing and integration with the Apache Geo projects, which all were extremely informative. I'm going to talk a little bit about the takeaways that I had from these discussions, but I think this is certainly something we can augment with comments. It's clear that one of the things that's happening with big data is that the focus is shifting from figuring out what happened last week to figuring out what's going to happen next week. And that, we were just talking about the problem of performance, right? You can't do that unless you can run these things extremely fast. And that just basically changes the paradigm. We have to think about how we're architecting these things differently to be able to make that transition to more predictive analytics. But we have to also get really good at figuring out what happened last week and doing that very quickly. As the new technologies progress, how do we take advantage of the existing technologies? I mean, I think the point that Keith was making about SQL is really good. It works. It's why people use it. It's well thought out. It would take a long time to replace it. If we're going to be leveraging a different underpinning technology, then we should be thinking about which are the pieces that we should take advantage of. And if we toss the baby out, we should go get it and bring it back. Raise it appropriately to go do citizen science.
Pokemon Go.
So obviously we live in this download mentality, and I think we've been hearing a lot from government organizations, right? We've got all this data, and we really want to think about how to make sure that it's made available in a way that people can take advantage of. But everybody wants us to create this massive pipe and download it. And I think this is an excellent point. The question is, how do we create these examples, these demonstrations that allow us to have the inertia or the momentum that people can get behind it and start to look at this as, I don't want to download all the data. It makes no sense to download all the data. How do I actually take advantage of these mechanisms for doing processing where the data is? And I think the last point that was made in Rob's talk was important, which is there's all this innovation that's happening in just big data, not geospatial big data. And I think just big data, doesn't really think that much about geo big data, right? And so if we're going to be savvy and we're going to be taking advantage of these opportunities, if we're going to be on top of something like, oh my God, computer vision just exploded and no one really knew it was going to happen, right? How do we make sure that we're there for that, so that we're part of that? Like the geo applications in big data are taking advantage of what's there, really driving the innovation. And I think that's a really important point. there's just tons of opportunities in this area, and I listed a couple that I was thinking about during the presentations. I think there's probably a lot of other opportunities for OGC here, but this attic, what was it? Moving from the disorganized attic strategy with the cloud. I think that's a clear place for us to be thinking about. And then the metadata structure, you know, the point Keith was making about unstructured data, you know, it's structured somewhere. Like, it's documented somewhere, even if it's written, you know, on the notepad underneath the guy's desk. That structure is something that we can be thinking about standards for, and I think big is almost definitely going to mean distributed, which also means they need to be able to communicate, which also means some kind of standards. So I think that distributed nature of big data is definitely going to be a place for that. And I think we can all agree that the 8th V is victory.
Well done, well done. Luis?
So 9V will be with Bermudez, wrongly spelled, so you will not have victory.
That's not right, is it? Somehow I ended up with that. That is it. Yeah? That's right?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what the VI is.
So session 4 had 4 presentations. The first one was done by Dan. So he highlighted some of the tools using by Digital Globe like GBDX, provided some examples about data analytics and some important issues about making the data small objects, even if they have full fidelity, to do good processes that can scale. And some of the results are done via REST, provide also very good examples about using machine learning, for example, to extract features from images. I think that was very cool. And some of the challenges that I took out from that discussion presentation was, well, we need to standardize the REST interfaces, not only the structure of the data, but how are we going to get the data out. Also, how do we better share algorithms among users? You know, I never heard in that session about talking web processing service. I don't know if, why not? But I was going to raise my hand and say, yeah, that's OGC stuff, you cannot say that. Anyway. And how do we make it easier for users to run algorithms? How do we bring all the data to the users in virtualization systems, or how do we create virtualization images for them to run their own analysis with their own algorithms? Then Peter talked about Razaman and about some of the issues, and I think it was very good that SQL was again mentioned, and that he was using sort of SQL-like business principles to do queries in multi-dimensional arrays. And I was happy to hear the support for WCS and WCPS. And the challenges that I heard from that talk was, well, can we tweak tools like Hadoop for analysis of complex data structures, which right now is not very easy to do, and looking forward to SQL supporting multi-dimensional arrays. Then we had a talk about moving features, and it was very good. He presented a lot of different scenarios, from disaster traffic support, indoor pedestrian tracking, and some of very good data analysis examples of how to get the most popular points of interest and evaluation of spaces for better flow of pedestrian flows. And solutions that he presented, he mentioned about simple feature access, that if some of you don't know simple features, SQL was one of the first OGC standards in 1999. And I think it would be very cool if we have something like simple feature access for big data that supports multi-dimensional arrays and NoSQL approaches. That's out of the presentation. And highlights need optimized common encodings and need moving feature access to support spatial temporal data. And then the last presentation from Pitney Bowes, they talk about advancing 2 areas, specifically geo-enrichment and analysis, and very cool use cases in telecommunications, property and casualty insurance, and financial services. And very interesting, they presented the use of these global hexagon grids that are used to integrate data, and she also talked about some approaches to uniquely identify features, which she thought master location data. We didn't have a lot of discussion about it, but I thought that was pretty neat. And the challenges, I think, was, well, how does that relate with the ODC discrete global grid systems? So, open questions, can we learn something from their solution, or can they try to implement the ODC discrete global grid system so we can learn and have a better standard? And yeah, that's all.
Very good. Joe?
So, and if there is anything missing, please let George know.
Yeah, there you go. Pass it to Joe, please. And Joe is the one under a deadline of getting it just in time, because he got the last session, which is in here somewhere. Sure. Didn't open yet, maybe that's the problem.